Now, I'm going to introduce our cookie recipe. We are going to be making 24 cookies. The ones that I'm going to be making today are chocolate chip, but your design challenge is going to be to change that up. Now, there's going to be several different ways you can do that, and I'm going to show you that at the end of our little class, but this is going to be the basic recipe that I am following. So we'll be making 24 cookies, and then we're going to have our flour, our baking soda, salt. We're going to be using oil today, and I'll be explaining why we're going to be using oil later. We're going to be using both brown sugar and white sugar, which is something else we're going to possibly change. We're going to use 2 eggs, vanilla extract, and chocolate chips. Now, all of these things are important parts of the recipe, but they are possible to change. And Miss Catherine's going to be telling us the science behind each one of these components and why they're all vital, but how we can use different various things to make it both cookies, but different types of cookies. The important thing is that the chemistry makes it necessary for us to cook or heat these cookies to make them blend together. So that is the chemical reaction that we will be using today. We will also be following important directions. So in science, just like baking, every step is very, very important. So if I was to put something in the bowl before the other thing, it could possibly change the chemical reaction itself. So we are now going to look at why this is all so important. So Miss Catherine, if you want to start explaining why baking is also chemistry.
Thank you, Miss Lauren. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start my slideshow, and I'm going to talk a lot about science. She mentioned a lot of good things, so let's see what we can figure out. Let's do some chemistry. Cookie Monster is one of my favorite characters. You know why Cookie Monster is? Because he's always got a good chocolate chip cookie, and it wouldn't surprise me if Miss Lauren made those cookies for him. So you've got to make sure that you look at some of the ideas she comes up with. The first topic, of course, we need to, before we go into the kitchen, is talk a little bit about safety. And I'm sure you know a lot about safety, but we're going to go through some things that you might need with cooking. Safety. How many of you recognize this? This is something to protect our hand when we pull the cookie sheet out of a hot oven so we don't burn ourselves. It is important that we have an oven mitt or some kind of pot holder with us when we start to cook. Preparing for safety is very important, and I want you to watch Miss Lauren when she cooks today and see if she does just that. We want to protect ourselves a little bit from the messes we might make, so we're going to put on our trusty apron. Do you have to wear an apron? No, you can wear old clothes, but I like to keep my clothes clean, so I'm going to protect myself with an apron. Since I have long hair, I'm going to tie it back. I don't want hair in my food. So it's not only a safety thing, it's a caution so that you protect everybody else. No running. We don't run in the kitchen with the ingredients. We want to make absolutely sure that we don't want to spill all those good things. So double check everything when you go through and you see that. You'll want to make sure that there is no running. And finally, the recipe. If we don't follow the directions, like Miss Lauren said at the beginning, we could come up with something really strange. So following directions is the most important because I don't know about you, but at the end, I want to be able to eat my final product. And that's that good old cookie down there in the corner. You may come up with some other safety rules. And if you do, or important questions, if you'll write these down or put them in the chat area for us, we will try to get to them as quickly as possible. Or you can wait till the end and we'll answer all the rest of your questions. So, safety. Well, that doesn't help me make the cookie. That doesn't tell me about the chemistry. Let's explore a little bit more. First, we take several ingredients. They're very physical in nature. What we mean by that is I can look at the sugar and I can see that it is crystal and I can see that it is white and it's all by itself. But when I combine or put together all these ingredients, I'm hoping to come up with a end product or a chemical change. So when we look at these, they're individuals. We mix them together, we're going to get a cookie. And that's basically what we're looking at when we are working with a chemical reaction. In our experiment today, Miss Lauren will make her marvelous chocolate chip cookies. So you know it's there, you see what we have. And we can come up with some ideas. From ingredients to our cookies. Well, how does this happen? Well, what we will do is take all the atoms from all the ingredients, atoms and molecules that make that up, and we are going to rearrange them and turn it into a cookie. You may know the three different parts of matter: liquid, gas, and solid. But if you notice what we're working with, we are working with solids and liquids, even in our experiment. We have something in science where we can take atoms. We can't create them, we can't destroy them, but we can rearrange. So today, we do have our ingredients that are in a liquid and solid state of matter. Every good scientist also needs tools. We need a heat source, and in this case, our tool is an oven to make our cookies. We have mixing bowls. Well, you have to put the ingredients in something to mix. So you're going to find mixing bowls as part of our scientific tools. You'll need a cookie sheet. And we're going to put our cookies, of course, in a cookie sheet to cook them in the oven. We may need a spatula. That way we can remove the cookies from the cookie sheet. Of course, we need spoons. And not only that, but measuring spoons, because in science, especially chemistry, we got to make sure we measure our ingredients. We may need measuring cups. How about a timer so we can time our cookies? And of course, a plate. Why would we need a plate? A place to put our cookies. So you may think of some more ideas that you might have, or items or tools that you'll need to use, but those are the tools that I have. So if there's any more, you can always add them to the chat box and let us know what else you might use for your cookies today. Following directions. We've said it a couple of times, and we'll probably say it a million more. Following directions is so important. Some things we can change in a recipe, and some things we can't. we call them variables versus non-variables. That's a pretty strange word, but we can change something. We call it a variable. If we can't change it, we have a non-variable. And I know those are big science words, but those are important science words when you start this experiment today. Let's look at the ingredients, see if that makes a difference. Here are the ingredients. We need some kind of fat, whether it be oil or butter. And I want you to remember that anything we talk about, you have to also consider allergies. If you have an allergy, you may can change it to something that will work better for you or your friend. So make sure that you look at that also. But we have to have some kind of fat because this will make our cookie chewy or crunchy. Keep that in mind. So if you're writing down and kind of figuring out what you might need in your recipe, that's essential. You have to have it. We will need a sweetener. I think Miss Lauren mentioned brown sugar and sugar. This will cause the cookie to spread. If we use white sugar, we'll have a crispier cookie. If we have brown, we have a chewier cookie. Maybe that gives me some ideas already of what I'm doing when I'm baking these cookies. I need something called a stabilizer, and flour is that. Because what flour does is hold the cookie together. So you've got to have something to hold it together. We need a rising agent, baking soda. I believe that is also in our recipe for today. If you use baking soda, you'll get a flatter cookie. If you use baking powder, you will get a puffier cookie. So if you change the soda to powder, you may want to do that. And finally, because we need one other thing that all cookies must have, is a binding agent, a liquid of some sort. And maybe water or eggs is a very good one, because what eggs do will determine if it rises or spreads. You can substitute depending on allergies. For example, eggs can be changed with honey. And what else is there in a cookie recipe that you may think of? It has to be flavor. So when Miss Lauren's cooking here in a little bit, I need you to look and see if she follows all of these nice little ingredients. And when you do your recipe, you're going to have to do that. Some other factors that you need today: temperature. And why is temperature important? We've got to remember that bacteria is in eggs, so you have to make that. But you also have to remember that sugar burns at 356. That's why she will use 350. So sugar will burn at 356 degrees Fahrenheit. So we don't want it to. So we keep the temperature a little lower. We use time. Another thing that we can use for time is our nose and smell. But usually we bake about 350 degrees, 8 to 10 minutes. Now that I've talked about all these different things, the science is done. It's time to start thinking about creating the cookie. Gather all your tools. Remember your safety. Need an ingredients to make your recipe. Follow the directions and enjoy. Now it's time for Miss Lauren to take you to her kitchen, and she is going to make cookies with you. I hope you're as excited as I am. Miss Lauren, you ready for the kitchen?
I am. Now
Okay.
that I've teleported to my kitchen, can everybody still hear me okay? Okay, guys. So today, our special cookie I'm very excited to make. You might have noticed I did put my hair up because that is part of our safety. I'm also now wearing my apron. So I have my equipment all ready. I have my oven mitt for when I do take them out of the oven. I've already preset my oven to 350 degrees. Now that heat is going to be very important because it is what allows us to make our chemical reaction. I'm also going to start using my tools. So my cookie sheet, today I've decided I'm just going to go ahead and spray it with some oil. That is what is going to make me be able to lift the cookies up easily. So I'm going to do that first because I am preparing it for when I place the cookies on there. I'm just going to go ahead and spray it down. Now, if I wanted to, I could use parchment paper. I could use butter. There's lots of different ways that you can do this. And that's one of the most important things about baking. Right now, it's kind of easy for us because we can go online and we can find all of these amazing recipes. We have them all at our fingertips. Originally, people needed either a cookbook, and even before then, people needed to have word of mouth, where somebody would do the experimenting. They would take the time to bake something and figure out what worked. Now we are fortunate enough that they tell us what we need to do, and we can simply follow a recipe that somebody all the way across the world has already done all the hard work for us. So we are going to be making this basic recipe, and then you are going to have to go and do the work and figure out what is going to make the perfect cookie for you. So put us down. You can see all of my tools are out and ready for me to use. So I have my mixing bowls, and I'm going to explain why I have two of them in just a second. So when I'm making my cookies, my favorite thing to do is first use the sugars. So I'm going to go ahead, and in my larger mixing bowl, I already have the brown sugar, and I'm going to mix my white sugar in there. And then I'm going to add my fat. And like I said, I decided I wanted to use oil today. So we are going to take 1 cup of oil and mix it into my fat. Or mix my fat into my sugar, I'm sorry. There we go. So let's put our 1 cup of oil in there. Now using oil and butter are just different types of reactions. They will make your cookies react differently. So if you prefer cookies that are flatter, then you might prefer one. If you prefer crispier cookies, you might prefer the other. Kind of up to you. So I'm going to mix that up using my hand mixer. So if you do not have a hand mixer, you can use a spatula. I also have one of those. By mixing it with the hand mixer, I am able to make lighter and fluffier cookies just because I'm introducing more air into my mixture. So I mix that in there, and now I'm going to be putting my eggs. So I'm going to be using 2 eggs today. I like to let them sit out on the counter first so they're room temperature. I find that that usually makes my cookies better. So I'm just going to crack those. And remember, when you are using eggs, like Miss Catherine said, they can contain bacteria. So be very careful. You also have to make sure that when you're cracking them, you don't get any of the shell in there. Nobody likes some shell in their cookies. So I'm going to mix those in there. Use my hand mixer again. Another reason I do like to use a hand mixture is it makes everything a little bit faster. It also gets everything really well incorporated. Now when we heat this mixture later, it's going to meld those things together, but if you have large clumps of things, it can add a weird flavor, and nobody likes that. So I have my eggs, my sugars, and my oil all in there. Now I have my salt. So I have a half a teaspoon of salt already measured out. I'm just going to sprinkle that over the mixture. Just going to mix it in. So when some people make their cookies, they'll put it all in at once. The problem with that is sometimes it does make it where you have lumps of things. So you have to be very, very careful about that. Now I'm going to be adding my baking soda. So I have 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and I'm just going to sprinkle that in again. And again, mix. There is a lot of mixing when you're making cookies or any kind of recipe. The reason that I enjoy baking instead of cooking is that I find that baking needs to be a little bit more precise. So if I was to make something like fajitas, I would be putting everything together and I could say, I really feel like I want more onions today. So I could have 2 onions instead of maybe 1, and that wouldn't affect the way that I'm making my recipe. But if I was making my cookies like I am now, and I think, I really want something sweet, and I decide instead of my 1 cup of sugar, I want to add 3 cups of sugar, my cookies will turn out entirely different, and they won't necessarily taste good. So you have to be very, very precise when you're doing something like baking. So I am now going to use my second bowl, and I'm going to put my flour in there. So I have 2 cups of flour here. Now I am going to add the extra half a cup. So flour is the most important thing when you are doing something like cookies. You really can't substitute it for too many things, just different types of flour. Because if you don't have flour, you don't really have a cookie. So I put my flour in this bowl, and the reason that I'm doing that is I can more precisely add it to this mixture. Again, you can dump it in, but I want to make sure that I carefully put in part of it. And then I'm just going to start mixing. Mix that in there. Now I'm going to keep adding that flour in just a second. But some of you might be thinking, these cookies aren't going to have a lot of flavor. And you are correct. Now, the flavor of our cookies is the thing that is the most easy to change. So today I'm going to be making chocolate chip cookies. But to make them chocolate chip, you have to add some vanilla first. So I'm going to put in 1 teaspoon of this vanilla. You do not need to add the vanilla to make these cookies look like cookies. This is purely a flavor thing. So instead, if you wanted to do something like add almond extract, that would be just the same. If you wanted to do something without an extract, that could change the flavor of the cookie, but it will not change the appearance or the makeup of it. I'm going to mix it in. And while that is mixing, I'm going to keep adding my flour. Okay. I get all the flour in there and mix it up really well. So now the consistency of my cookies is entirely different. It is now thicker. So once I have that all in there, get all the goodness off of my beaters. So like I said, I could have done that with a spatula. It just would have been a little bit more time. So you have a wide variety of tools you can use for this. So I'm going to get that all off of my beaters because I want all of the cookie. And I'm just going to scrape the side so I can get any excess flour off of there. And now for the best part of the cookie. I'm going to be adding my chocolate chips. Again, the chocolate chips are the thing that you could easily change. So if you don't like chocolate, you could add something like dried fruit, raisins. My other type of cookie that I love are actually oatmeal with raisins in them, which I know some people aren't a huge fan of, but I love them. So I would basically make the cookie the same way, but instead of adding quite as much flour, I would incorporate some oatmeal and use raisins instead. I could also make them oatmeal with chocolate chip, oatmeal with chocolate chip and raisins. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. So I am going to just do 1 cup of these beautiful chocolate chips. And instead of mixing, I'm going to be using a technique that's called folding. So I'm going to fold in the chocolate so that it is in all of it. Because these chunks are so big that my mixer won't do quite as good a job as I can with my hand. I'm just going to fold those in. And folding is less harsh than mixing. So I'm going to get them all in there. Okay, looking pretty good. Beautiful chocolate chip cookie. And then I'm going to either use a spoon or my hand if you so prefer. Just make sure you wash them first. And I'm going to scoop the cookie dough out. And I'm just going to plop it here onto my baking pan, just like that. I have some beautiful chocolate chip cookies. I would then put them into the oven for about 15 minutes. On the recipe that we're following, it does say about 8 to 10 minutes. Now, if you want them to be crunchier or softer, you will need to vary the time. I always like to put less time first because then I can make that decision later. So when I am doing that, I will then use my handy dandy oven mitt to safely remove them from the oven. Now, I didn't think we wanted to wait a full 15 minutes, so I already made some cookies for us. So this is what you will get if you follow the recipe that I have given you. Now, because we talked about so many different types of that, I wanted to show you if we did a little bit of experimentation. So I also went ahead and made another batch of cookies. So on this plate, you can see that we have 2 very different types. These are the ones that I made with the recipe we just followed. This is the same recipe, but instead of using oil, I made them with butter. Now, I love butter in my cookies, but this doesn't look quite right. So when we change the different types of ingredients that we add, we also need to make sure that we alter other things in the recipe. That's because every part of the recipe has been carefully gone through by somebody that wanted to make the perfect cookie. And they realized, if I add this much baking soda, I need to use this much butter. Or if I use this much baking soda, maybe I shouldn't use butter. I should change it to oil. So I do encourage you to experiment. Just remember, not everything's going to turn out perfect. I knew that I had a good cookie recipe, but I wanted to try something different and see if I can maybe use a different ingredient, and it didn't work, but that's still okay. If you do want to be really careful about it and just experiment in a slightly safer way where you know things are going to be good, just try changing your chocolate chips to some dried fruit or change your extract. So there are a lot of fun ways to change your cookies and make them taste exactly how you would want them to taste. So now that I've kind of shown you all of the beautiful science of making cookies, let's see if we have any science related questions for either me or Ms. Catherine.